This is part one of a lecture in which I present my book, Euthanasia in the Netherlands. The story of this book starts in 1991. That year, I took part in a fascinating seminar that was conducted by Ronald Dworkin on euthanasia, abortion, and euthanasia. And this was my introduction to the field of medical ethics. It had no relevance to all that I've studied until then. I was interested in issues of democracy and free speech, and I thought about medical ethics and end of life only as a layperson. However, Dworkin provoked my curiosity to the extent that I decided to embark on a fascinating journey that still is part of my life nowadays. So in the summer of 1991, I started my research on end of life. The first country that I studied was Israel. And then that followed with further visitations to hospitals and research centers in other countries, including United Kingdom, United States, Canada. And then in 1994, I received an invitation by the Hastings Center of Bioethics. Hastings is a wonderful place if you conduct research in medical ethics. It is rather small, but it has an extensive library. If you do research on any topic that has to do with medical ethics, Hastings would be great. And I visited the winter of 1994, part of it, at the Hastings Center. That winter was rather harsh in the history of New York, upstate New York. I think it experienced something like 14 consecutive snowstorm. That meant that I had nowhere to go. I was more or less stuck in my office, working from very early morning until very late at night. Often I would be the only person in the center because most of the people could not even come to the center. And given my interest in euthanasia, the only country in the world at that time that practiced euthanasia, although the euro rather than the facto, there was no law, there were only guidelines that were provided by the Dutch Royal Society of Physicians. But since the late 1960s, the Netherlands was practicing euthanasia. So it seemed obligatory to me to study the Netherlands very, very closely. And Hastings provided the optimal condition for such research simply because the extensiveness of the material that was available to me to read. So that was the focus of my interest during that winter. And the more that I read about the Netherlands, the more that I understood that there is a problem here. Why is that? The data was quite clear. The Dutch government issued a very extensive report called the Remmelink report of the euthanasia policy and practice in the Netherlands. So you read this document very, very carefully, and you can make up your mind to what extent whatever is going on in the Netherlands is okay or not. The thing was the interpretations, because there were some scholars who were looking at the same data who would say the Netherlands serves as an example. It's a model to be followed. Green light, strong green light. Adapt euthanasia. See, it is working in the Netherlands. Whereas other scholars looking at exactly the same data, and they would say red flashing light, Stop. Don't go there. Wrong model to follow. A lot of abuse is taking place. So that's, make you understand that at least some of the people on both parts of the spectrum, they're not motivated by science. They are motivated by ideology. They have a very firm point of view, either endorsing or objecting to euthanasia, and they would use any data to hammer their point of view, notwithstanding. That means that I, as a researcher, would like to know what's going on there. I need to be very careful when I analyze the literature. And moreover, even if I apply the best of my abilities to scrutinize and analyze, I would still be in the dark because this data is open to vast contrasting interpretations. So the only way that I can clear that fog that was gathering in my mind was to go there and see for myself what is going on. I was writing during that period of time between 1991 to 2001, a book called The Right to Die with Dignity. And I was advancing in the writing with this book, but I knew that I have to have at least one chapter about the Netherlands, and I could not write that chapter on the basis of the secondary literature that I found at Hastings. To compound matter further, the forefather of Hastings, Dan Callahan, was there, and Dan has my utmost appreciation. I regarded him as not only forefather of Hastings, but one of the forefathers of the field of bioethics, medical ethics. A very smart man. Of course, he had his own biases. He was a Catholic, and he had an agenda. And the agenda was clear. He was against euthanasia. However, at the same time, he was honest enough to acknowledge some things that are also against his point of view. And also, the way that he relates to topics tells you something about how difficult that topic is, or the amount of criticism that should be employed. And when he heard that my subject matter at Hastings is euthanasia in Netherlands, he came to see me, and then he said something that I will never forget. He said, Rafi, in the Netherlands, there is culture of death. I said, what? Culture of death. Aren't you too harsh on them then? Why are you choosing these words? And he said, Rafi, I'm a careful scholar, but I'm telling you, I visited the Netherlands. I went there as a consultant, and I'm telling you, the things that I heard there, they're unparalleled. They just think differently. And the way they think creates certain culture that make death part of the place. And this is like a mirror image of what you heard in Israel or the United States or the United Kingdom. Go there and see for yourself. Don't trust me. So I was looking for the right opportunity to go there. And in 1999, I was invited again to the Hastings Center for a second visit. This time I was researching not only euthanasia in Netherlands, but also advanced directives and compassion at the end of life, and the relationship between physicians and patients, This is something that of interest to me because of my interest in media ethics. So it combines my interest in media ethics and medical ethics. We put them together. And during the summer, the Dutch government provided me with a scholarship to come and visit the Netherlands and conduct a deep field work for the entire summer. And this was the opportunity that I was waiting for. That's what I wanted. So prior to go to the Netherlands, I wrote to about 30, 40 people whom I knew thanks to their scholarship, whom I knew by reading whatever they published. I wrote to them, I explained the reasons why I'm contacting them, that I'm about to come to the Netherlands, and I asked for their time to devote an hour or two with me and discuss euthanasia in the Netherlands, the policy and practice in their country. I should say that the vast majority of the researchers were willing to meet with me and to allow time for me to conduct a deep semi-structured interview with them. A few were not in the country, they were on vacation, but those who remained in the country, the vast majority, I think with the exception of one or two, all of them were willing to see me. So during the summer of 1999, quite depressing, I have to say. The weather was Dutch, meaning it was rainy and cloud, and I don't know why the UK has such a notorious reputation for weather. I mean, justly so, but it's not the only one. I think the Dutch weather is very similar. So instead of enjoying the Israeli weather on the beach, I was in the Netherlands hiding from the rain and going from one meeting to another to speak about death. I can think about better ways to spend the summer, don't you? But that was my decision to spend the summer. I wanted to advance with my research. I want to understand. And it was important for me to complete my book on the right to die with dignity. It was a difficult summer, but it was also fascinating because I learned a lot. I heard in the Netherlands things that I never saw in the literature. And this is one of the advantages of having interviews with stakeholders, because during the interaction that you have with very knowledgeable people, you are able to hear things that you otherwise would not come to your attention. And I was fortunate to meet with the person who wrote the Dutch law, with people who wrote the extensive Dutch reports that were summoned by the Dutch government, heads of medical faculties, deans of faculties, physicians, senior physicians, head of wards in hospitals, many, many stakeholders that were the making and those who implement the policy of euthanasia in the Netherlands. In part 2 of this talk, Euthanasia in Netherlands, I would explain what happened during that visit to the Netherlands. Thank you, and see you soon in part B.